Welcome back, guys. So last week I shared about what I've kind of been praying and sensing is the vision and direction for us as a church. And I hope that excited you. I hope that that's brought you to a place of seeking God, because this isn't something we can do by ourselves. This isn't something that's going to happen as a result of clever plans. It's going to happen because we enable Jesus. We make space for Jesus to move in our community afresh. And we've got a bit of work still to do, I think. What I shared last week is quite general, and I think we've still got a bit of work to do to clarify that a bit more, to work out, okay, well, that's quite general. We can say that about a number of places. What does that really mean for us at Redland? What does it really mean for us at Redland to go deeper? Because it could mean about 10 things. Which one of those 10 things does it mean? What does it mean for us at Redland to go wider? Because it could mean about 10 things, and probably various, members of our community have got excited because, oh, great, well, we should be doing more with the homeless, or we should be doing more with this group or that group or this church or that church. And it's like, well, we can't do all of those things. What's God calling us to do, and what does that look for us to go wider at this time? And so I hope you'll join me in continuing to pray and reflect about that as we kind of clarify that over the kind of coming sort of months and years together. What I wanted to do today, though, is I want to kind of, building on what we shared last week, to just share a couple of things that I've noticed and that other people have echoed to me in conversation that I think are potential barriers to us, journeying forward in this vision. They're not walls. I don't think they're unassailable, but they are barriers. And this is probably going to be a bit more of a kind of harder video in some ways, because it requires us to confront some things in the life of our community, and that's always tricky. But I think we really need to grapple with the reality of where we are and the reality of the things that might hold us back from going forward into this vision, because otherwise we can get as excited as we like, but we're just going to constantly hit a glass ceiling, and we're going to get frustrated, and we're going to get disappointed, and we're going to go nowhere. So I just want to share two things that I think are barriers in us doing this. The first relates to us going deeper. I think one of the barriers that I see is kind of present in our community at the moment that's going to inhibit us from going deeper unless we can grow in this is around the area of vulnerability. I think we struggle beyond a certain point, and there's exceptions to this, I'm sure, but I think we struggle to be vulnerable with one another as a community. I think we struggle to have those conversations where we say, you know what, I've not got it all sorted. I'm a bit of a mess, and I need you to encourage me, maybe even challenge me, and certainly to pray for me. We live in a very middle-class culture, and that's just where we are. I don't think we need to just rubbish that. But one of the challenges of living in a middle-class culture is middle-class culture has a high place for the value of respectability. We always want to present to others this kind of veneer, this front of togetherness and okayness. And, the default position is one of life's all right, we're together, we know what we're doing, rather than life's a mess, we have no idea, and everything's falling apart. But the reality of our lives is that they're a bit of a mix. We are not the finished article. We are far from being the finished article. We've got so far to go, every single one of us in different ways, in our journey of allowing Jesus to transform us. But we need to be able to be honest and vulnerable with one another. We need to be able to have those conversations with people where we say, you know what? I really struggle with pride. And I don't really want to admit it, but I do. And I need you to encourage me. I need you to challenge me. I need you to pray for me. We need those conversations where we can be honest about where we're at in our discipleship to Jesus, where we can say to someone, my prayer life sucks. I can be quite selfish. I think I can be a bit angry. The way I speak to my wife at times is sarcastic and demeaning, and I don't like it. We need relationships where we give permission for other people to challenge us. I don't see all of my faults. I see life through my eyes, and there are plenty of things that my eyes just don't see because they're limited in their scope. My perception is limited in what it can see, and I need other people to be able to speak into my life to say, Will, the way you speak to Katie at those times, I'm not sure that's okay. I'm not sure that's what Jesus has created you for. Can I just challenge you there? We need relationships where those kind of conversations can happen without us feeling threatened or crushed. We need relationships where we can share with one another, and be vulnerable about where we really are at. Discipleship to Jesus is not something we do by ourselves. It's personal, but it's never private. And we've got to be able to have a community life that means we can share that together. And that's going to be hard. Growing in vulnerability is hard, it's scary, and it's exposing. But we've got to do it if we're to go deeper, else we're just going to hit a glass ceiling and hit a status quo position in our kind of discipleship to Jesus, and we're going to go no further. And so we've got to wrestle with that. So I think we need to grow in vulnerability if we're to go deeper. The second barrier relates to us growing younger as a church. I think in many ways, our success as a church could blind us to our failings in this area. If I turn up on a Sunday, it feels great. There's loads to celebrate. We've got loads of people there. We're like, in the mornings, it's pretty full. We've got some problems there. That's really exciting. There's loads to celebrate. We're doing an incredible job, and I really mean this, at engaging with those in older generations. The problem with that, though, is I think it can blind us to what's not there, because it hits us in the face less. And the reality is that as a church, we are doing a pretty poor job at engaging with those under the age of 40. They're not finding this church to be a context that they can call home in numbers that come even close to representing the makeup in the city and the local area. We are disproportionately representative of our local area, where 60% of people are under the age of 40 and only about 10% are over the age of 65. At Redland on Sundays, we've got a few people, not loads, but a few in the 30 to 40 category, but not many. We've got virtually no one. There's a couple of exceptions, but virtually no one in the 18 to 30 category. We have got to let that pain us. We have got to let that trouble us, because that means that 2 entire generations are not able to call this church home. That means that 2 entire generations are missing out on the good news of Jesus. That means 2 entire generations are not growing in, deeper in what it means to know Jesus and allow him to transform every aspect of their lives. There are people who might come to Redland who might not go anywhere else, but don't feel able to at the moment. That's got to pain us, and we've got to wrestle with the reality of that and the reality of why that is, and ask the hard questions around that and make the hard and necessary changes to become a place where we're a context where those people can feel welcome and can belong. And so I think there's a lot at stake. One at stake is that I think this is a gospel responsibility, that we cannot withhold the good news of Jesus from 2 entire generations. I think that's negligent. But the other reason why I think this is a priority is because I think a failure to address this could lead to some quite serious problems a lot sooner than probably we imagine. The reality of where we are now is that if we carry on in the way we are now, in 5 to 10 years, we will not only be not engaging with those under the age of 40, we will not be engaging with those under the age of 50. Because our issue as a church is not that we're engaging well with people of a certain age, it's that we're engaging well with the people of a certain generation. 60-year-olds today are different to 60-year-olds 20 years ago, are different to 60-year-olds 20 years before that. When people who are 40 today hit 50, they don't magically change and think, oh, Redland's going to be an amazing place where I can find home. They still think the same way, they still operate in the same way, they still need the same things. And so wind on 5-10 years and we will not be engaging with those under the age of 50. Likely, that means that we will have hardly any children, which means our kids' work provision will go down, which means the existing children who are there and their families will start to question whether it's a place they can really stay long term, and it won't be long before we have no children. Add to that the fact that, people like having young people around. It makes us, it's what the church should be. It should be a multi-generational community. And so some people feel a bit disappointed by that, and they think, well, maybe I need to go, and so they leave. And, we're already experiencing a dip in giving as people retire and as people pass away. That will continue. And what that will mean is that our giving as a whole church dips down quite significantly, which means what we're able to do and the staffing we're able to kind of sustain will reduce, which means our provision will reduce, which means a whole nother layer of people will be like, oh, this isn't what it used to be, and they'll leave, which in turn will, cause more people to leave and the giving to go down, and we'll hit a decline spiral. And so I share that not because I want to be overly, depressive, but because I really want us to grapple, and I know it's hard, but I want us to grapple with the reality of what's at stake. We can't afford to be flippant about this. We can't afford to be like, maybe it will sort itself in the future. If we don't get to grips with this issue now, we could end up in a really dark place in, the next 5 to 10 years as a church. We need to celebrate our success, but we need to not allow our success to blind us to our failings in this area. We need to grow younger as a church. It's a gospel imperative, and we need to ask the hard questions and make the difficult decisions to enable us to do that. I'm so hopeful though, guys. These things that I've shared, the vulnerability issue, the young issue, they're barriers. They're not walls. They're perfectly assailable. But they're only assailable if we recognize them for what they are, and if we, take the necessary steps to grow together as a community in climbing over those barriers. But I'm hopeful because God is calling us in this direction that we will be able to. We're not left on our own in this. He's going to help us. But we've got to we're in it together, and we've got to have that approach. And so I'd love to invite you to be praying into these issues, to be praying into, our vulnerability. We need to be praying for ourselves and for one another that we grow in that. We need to be praying that we can see and grapple with the issues that hold us back from engaging with younger generations, because we need to overcome them, because we will become a church that's deeper, younger and wider, but only if we seek Jesus and if we respond to what he says and how he leads us in overcoming those barriers.